Everything that I tell you, don't do what I did, and your kids won't suffer the consequences of your sins. Like, I was a horrible father, and my kids hurt for that. I was a horrible husband, and several women hurt for that. I was a self-centered, egotistical, maniacal, narcissistic piece of garbage. And they didn't deserve that. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another riveting rendition of Mic Check Real Life. Here we are. I actually can introduce the show right this time. If you listen to the interview with my wife, Melissa, you'll know that I bombed the intro. Yeah, our first ever podcast, and the intro I couldn't even get right. But that's how it is here. We're real. We even let our mistakes be seen. We do some editing because as individuals that aren't practiced public speakers, I'm really out of practice for radio or podcasting. It's been years since I've done it. So it's a little difficult to get through talking first off to a camera and getting through a thought without saying or ah or any of the things of that nature, and to try to put a thought together in a timely process and not have a significant pause in there. And so we edit that out just to make it flow smoothly for you, for lack of a better term, audience. I don't see this as a platform of entertainment. I see this as an opportunity to reach those that are still broken. But it is a podcast, and podcasts have audiences. So I thank you for being a part of that and for giving us the opportunity to be here. We have officially got the podcast up on all of the channels that I could get it on. We're using a program called Riverside. No, they are not sponsoring this. This is not a plug for them. That is just an easy platform for me to use. I have a paid subscription for that, and it allows me to strip the audio from the video and uploaded it into Apple Podcasts and Spotify podcasts, and also gives me an RSS feed to throw into the other platforms like Amazon and some of the others. None of those are sponsoring me, so we don't have any sponsors here other than myself. Everything comes out of Melissa and I's pocket. So this is because we just know that this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. She willingly volunteered, somewhat willingly. She doesn't like to talk about herself, but she was very willing to do the first interview for a testimony here, and I'm so grateful for that. If you haven't heard that, you really got to get in there. It's such a powerful testimony. 40 years of just brokenness, and it's just amazing to see what can happen when somebody focuses on the right thing and how they can come through so much drama and tragedy and now be so successful and warm and caring. But enough about that. If you want to hear more about that, go watch that episode. But today I thought that I would get in here, and I had an interview scheduled for this morning. One thing you'll find out about individuals that are broken or were broken is that when they heal, all they want to do is help. And so I had an interview with a dear brother, and he was going to come in this morning and share his testimony, which I'm very excited to get to hear. He's never shared it publicly with anybody. And so he's volunteered to come in and share it with us. However, somebody came in needed some help, and he is always willing to jump in and help. And so hopefully we will get to rein him in and just take a little bit of time to sit down and hear his testimony, because he's got a powerful testimony. I've heard snippets. I don't know his whole testimony, and I'm excited to hear it, and I'm excited for you to get to hear it. But in the meantime, I have told you that I would sit down and I would give my testimony. And now one thing I want you to really understand is in testimonies, especially for people that have significantly tragic lives, they've experienced a great deal of trauma, neglect, abandonment, abuse, things of those natures, that as these people come in and share their testimonies, there may be some difficulty with timelines and events and tying. Maybe they'll cross over and this event actually was that event or anything like that. And I don't want anybody to ever get the idea that somebody is misrepresenting or lying about their story. It's just difficult to put the things together. And I have sat down and I have tried to write out my testimony. And I've had a pretty difficult life, maybe not as difficult as some, but I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. One of the things that happens is when you self-medicate to get through some of that pain and some of that tragedy is things start to get blurred in your brain. And so part of the healing process is trying to come through and, get rid of those things that you try not to think about them. You don't want to self-medicate. And so we just release it. We let it go. And so coming in and trying to recall some of this stuff. Some of the more significant events stand out very well. You just can't forget them, such as my mother's death, 95. You just don't forget those things. However, there are some other things that blended or were tragedies that were back to back on a different kind of a scale. I wouldn't say a lesser scale, but on a scale nonetheless. They tend to blur lines. Like one event may cross over into another event, and maybe they were a couple of months apart, but you get the dates mixed up or something, which one came first or second or something like that. Because again, you're in an altered state through a lot of that to try to mask the pain, then your memory has a difficult time in recalling all of the facts of it. And I also share somewhat of a concern about that because there are a lot of things that I remember, but I don't remember exact dates or events, the individuals in the events or anything like that. And those individuals don't really matter. We don't want to name names or anything like that. Part of the healing process is forgiveness and coming through and not being a victim, being a victor. And so I just want you to know as we go on through this, if you hear people maybe stutter a little bit, things of those natures, don't just automatically assume somebody's telling a lie. Just understand that some of the people that are going to come in here are going to have some significantly traumatic events, and some they're going to have some traumatic events. Using Melissa as an example, a couple of things that she didn't share that she still, has, I don't know if you want to really say repressed it or just things that she's just not comfortable sharing. And that's okay too. Nobody has to come in here and tell their whole story. There are still things that they need to grapple with, things that they need to come through, get through, heal from. And that's okay. I never want anybody to come in here. I'm never going to press anybody to come in and share a testimony of something that's going to damage them or put them in a situation that's going to challenge them or shame them or anything like that. Everybody's on their healing journey, and that's what we want to do is we want to encourage people to continue on that healing journey. We don't ever want to trip somebody, be a stumbling block to that healing. We want to love them right where they're at and just continue moving through. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit of my testimony. This is going to be a little bit different. It's not an interview, right? So I don't have anybody poking or prodding me, asking me questions, asking me to unpack things or, reframing things or anything like that. It's just going to be me sharing a little bit about my life, where I come from, why I am the way I am now, why it's so important for me to have a servant heart and to serve others and be there for others, and why I believe what I believe now. So I guess the only place to start is at the beginning. And so I was born in 1968. I'm 57 years old. And for the first 10 years of my life, I have what I would say was the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle. You heard my wife say that yesterday about the first few years of her life. That's something that I've always said. And a lot of the things that I will share today, you'll see why her and I are kindred spirits because we share so much of a similar testimony. So at 10 years old, I was devastated when my parents took my siblings and I have 5 brothers and sisters, and they took us to tell us that they were getting divorced. We had never seen them fight. We'd never seen them argue. We have always ever seen my dad get up, go to work hard to pay the bills. Mom stayed at home. She raised us kids, fed us kids, sent us off to school. We come home from school. I was a daddy's boy. I'd wait for my dad to come home from work. After I got home from school, I'd sit on a porch or be waiting at the door. He'd bring me, he'd save me a little cup of coffee in his thermos, which to this day, I still enjoy my coffee. Let me take a sip. And so he would bring me a part of his banana. And that's one of my fondest memories as a little boy is getting to have a little bit of coffee out of dad's thermos and eat a part of his banana that he saved from lunch for me. I remember being out in the wrecking yard. My grandparents owned a wrecking yard. I always got to be with my dad, get to play in the cars. I also learned a lot of language from my dad as he worked on cars and threw tools. And I grew up learning how to work on cars and use colorful metaphors and throw tools. I definitely wanted to be like my dad. I still love my dad. He's an amazing man to this day. So 10 years old, it was devastating. We never knew it was coming, and everything changed from that point. Now, I do remember being a little boy, being bullied at school. I remember in kindergarten losing my best friend who was riding his bicycle and got hit by a car. His name was Bernard, and that was a tragic event in my life. That was probably the first loss I ever experienced of a friend, not of like an older family member. I remember my great grandma passing and everything, but it didn't hit me like Bernard did. But still, I would say I had to leave it to Beaver life. I don't remember internal struggles at home. Like the family unit was just so strong. And my little brother, I picked on him and we fought, that sibling stuff. So moving on after 10 years old, I remember at school, the bullying started when there was some sort of conflict between my mom and my dad. I remember when they told us and they said we had to pick who we were going to live with. I picked my Aunt Ella because I couldn't pick between mom and dad. And we all loved Aunt, we call her Lala. And so we were going to I was going to go live with her. So I didn't have to pick between mom and dad. And I was probably angry at both of them and thought you don't deserve either one of you deserve me. But anyway, the thoughts of a little boy, right? So needless to say, we ended up living with our dad for a short time. And except for my sister, my older sister, she went to live with mom, but she was always staying at her best friend's house. And then something happened, and I can't remember what. And it's really hard to remember all of this from back then. The police showed up at school and took my sister, and she ended up in a foster home. And I tried to fight the police. I was 10. The police were trying to take my big sister. And I'd already seen enough, and I didn't know what was going on. And I remember getting so angry, and I went after the police. I was going to fight them for taking my sister. And I had anything against the police or anything. It's just, it was my sister and the cops were taking her. I didn't know what to do. And that is one thing growing up. One thing I do remember being little in the internal struggles not in the house, but in the external family unit, there was always fighting. Like my dad was always fighting with cousins and uncles were always fighting uncles and grandpa was a fighter. And like fighting was a thing, drinking and fighting. Dad wasn't a drinker that I remember. I only remember him drunk maybe a couple of times, and that was post-divorce. I just remember fighting. I remember him putting his hand through a window trying to punch somebody one time. Like there was always fighting amongst cousins and things like that. I guess it was pretty toxic then. But in the home, it was leave it to Beaver. I don't know how that works. But so I was no stranger to fighting, but I wasn't a fighter at that time until that time when there was something to fight for. Like my sister, I didn't know what was going on. Police were taking her. And so I went after the cops. I was going to take them on. I mean, I came out fists up and I started swinging. They had to restrain me. And from that day on, though, after my sister got taken, some of the kids, because, kids can be mean, some of the kids at school turned into bullies. And I remember one specifically, and I'm not going to name any names. I do remember his name. It stands out in the back of my mind. And I've forgiven him because now that I understand kids, and I went on later in life to know his brother and know some of the stuff in his family that was going on. And so he was acting out his own trauma and trying to find a release for it. I just happened to be that release. But I remember going on and this kid would chase me up trees. He was super mean and he was super tough, which is why I was scared of him. But this kid, he would just every day after school, he would chase me down to my friend Patrick's house where there was these two tall trees. And I was a little tiny thing when I was little. I was super tiny. In kindergarten, they had to build me my own desk because my feet couldn't touch the ground. I was really little. And this kid was much bigger than me. He's twice my size. And he would always chase me down to Patrick's house. And so I was super light being little. I would climb to the top of the tree as high as I could get to the point that the branches were just about bowing. And that kid, he would try to come up the tree, but he couldn't get up as high as I could get. And so he would keep me up there it seemed like hours, but usually he had to go home. So it was probably really no more than, 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes. But back then it seemed like I was up there forever and nobody was going to come rescue me. And so that just kept going on, from the age of like 10 until, I think that was like third or fourth grade. I don't remember how old ages are in school anymore, but up till sixth grade, it was like the final couple of weeks of school. I remember there was field day. We used to do field day in school. And this kid came at me, and I had just had enough. And there was a lot of other stuff going on at home. Mom and dad were still fighting over his kids. Mom, through this whole time, she really took a lot out on me, super abusive. And I reminded her of my dad because I was just like my dad. I was a daddy's boy growing up, and I was super angry he was gone. By this time, we were living with her now. We were living in his house. He was staying in an apartment with three friends, a little studio apartment with three friends, and paying all the bills so that we could stay in the home and go to school at our school. And, yeah, there was just a lot of stuff there. But anyhow, all of that fighting and everything was going on, and mom was abusive. Around this time, go back to 10 years old, mom took up drinking and drugs during this time. And so she was always out partying. She was always gone, and she would have people come stay with us to babysit. And I think it was between 10 and 11 years old, she had one of my cousins come stay and babysit, and my cousin molested me. And now, my cousin wasn't all there. She was definitely diagnosed with some mental illness, and she should not have been watching us, but she was. And she took it upon herself to have her way with me in multiple different ways and multiple different things that she did to me. And at 10 years old, I didn't have a clue what was going on, and I couldn't tell anybody. The standard things you can't tell anybody. You'll get hurt. It'll be your fault. Those kind of things. And so I was dealing with that. I was just so much anger. So again, sixth grade field day, this kid decided to come pick on me in the hallways, and I was super angry. It was the day. It was the day. Everything that was pent up decided to come out, and I lost it. I mean, I don't even remember the whole thing. If you ever heard anybody say that they got so angry they saw red, that was me that day. I literally saw red, and I pummeled that kid. Oh my goodness. And again, I wasn't big. He was, but as a typical bully, he really did not have in him what he needed to have in him to defend himself when that pot boiled over. And I hurt him so bad. And I remember that. I felt really bad for how bad I hurt him. And then I ended up stuffing him in a locker and locking him in, and determined at that day that nobody was ever going to hurt me that way. I was not going to be anybody's victim. That was kind of nobody's going to do that to me again once I saw what I was capable of doing. And so from that point on, all bets were off, and I did not let him pick on me again, nor did he try. After that, it was a done deal. But there's always bigger and badder out there, right? And so 11 years old, between 11 and 12 years old, it's the first time that I ever remember being out on the streets. And I wandered the streets and met some street kids. This went on for some time. And during that time, I think I was 11 years old, the first time I was introduced to methamphetamine. I had a couple of gentlemen that lived an alternative lifestyle, we'll say that were into crystal meth, and introduced me into some crystal meth. Now, they didn't molest me or anything like that, but they did release a demon when they introduced me to the crystal meth. And I remember having this vision under this methamphetamine at 11 years old, this vision. Now, we weren't a super religious family. We did do Catholic mass growing up, but I mean, I didn't have a super understanding of all of that or anything like that. So, I mean, we weren't going to church a lot or anything like that after the parents broke up. I think they were actually excommunicated from the church for being divorced. So there was none of that going on or anything. And so I met these guys through some street kids because, of course, they had drugs. They were delivering them. Yeah, and I didn't want to feel like a coward, at 11 and tell them no. So I went ahead and partook. And I remember having this vision of this strange, demonic looking creature walking over. Now, this is at 11 years old. I'd had no introduction to anything like that. But there's this vision that I had of this strange demonic looking individual, this creature, with multiple arms and fangs of a weird color, walking across valleys of skulls and bones and just screaming, I am the destroyer. I am Shiva. So I just took that persona onto myself, and I just decided that that was because at that time, all of the street kids had nicknames. And so I took that on as a nickname. And so we had, whether we did graffiti on the walls. Now, this is during the late 70s, early 80s. So we would carve into things, and anything I graffitied or sharpied, or they had these things called Magnum 44 markers I wrote on, or, we'd carve into things. And it was always the Shiva. And, um, and I took that persona on, and I lived that persona. I mean, I was just destructive. Everybody's life that I came into, I was destructive. And so the methamphetamine, of course, only fueled that, and later got into LSD. Mom would let me come home occasionally. Her food stamps would stop, or it would affect her check because I wasn't in school. And so she would bring me back, and then we'd have it out again, and she'd beat me and throw me out. And the funny thing is if you talk to my 5 brothers and sisters, every one of us had a different mom, even though we had the same mom. Like, she had a different relationship with each and every one of us. And some of them may have experienced some of the extreme that I did, but not to the extent I did. And there's some things that I didn't experience from her that they did, and things like that. It's just quite interesting, the dynamic of it. And by no means am I trying to defame my mom. I love my mom. God rest her soul. I pray that she's going to get to see the Father in that time. But at this time, she's not with us anymore. So I'm not trying to give her a bad name. She was a very young mother. She was 14 when she got pregnant with my sister, 15 when she had my sister, 15 when she got pregnant with me, 16 when I was born. So, I mean, she was still a child, and Dad wasn't much older. I mean, he was 17 when they met, and sis was born 18 when I was born. They were very young couples. So by no means am I defaming them or making them out to be horrible people, because they had their own damage. My mom's story was tragic as well. And, the saying is, hurt people hurt people. And so, what do you expect from a young mom? She didn't have a dad. She didn't have a healthy relationship with her stepfather. I mean, some of her stories were tragic as well. So I don't blame her for anything. I did for years, until I started understanding how my pain and my hurt transferred over to my children, and how my children's hurt and pain are transferring some over into their lives and their children's lives, and how they're having to try to uh, bring that back and not live the sins of their fathers, and try to make things good for their children. And so we are creatures of our environment. And so anyway, this street lifestyle, I spent a lot of time on the streets, and my mom got to the point where she wouldn't let me come back. Now, my dad, he tried. My mom spent a lot of time putting really negative things into my head about my dad, and telling me horrible stories and making him out to be a monster. And so going from a daddy's boy to somebody that hated his father for all the things that he did with his mom, to his mom, only because I wanted a relationship with my mom, but she didn't want one with me, and she kept exposing me, and I was trying to please her, but we couldn't get along. And my dad was always trying to take me in. I mean, I remember multiple times juvenile hall would call him to come get me, and he would take me home, and I would leave because, well, being on the streets, I had freedom. Mom's a drug addict and an alcoholic and would let me do whatever I wanted. So being in a house where there was rules, because my dad had rules, he was a man of rules. I just, I couldn't stay there, especially with a man that I thought I hated. And so I lived on the streets. Mom would constantly throw me out, beat me, throw me out, beat me. I got to the point where she would always let the street kids stay with her. She had a heart for the street kids. And so I learned early on, it was almost like puppies. You bring a puppy home, Mom, can I keep it? And I would bring the street kids home because my mom would feed them, and then I would get to eat. And then we'd get in a fight, and she'd throw me out. And then they got to sleep there. They got to wear my clothes. They got to eat my food. It was a strange dynamic. And I spent a lot of time on the streets and ended up in gangs, still doing drugs, life of violence. I didn't watch, but had one of my best friends get murdered when I was, I believe, 16 years old. His name was Eddie. We were supposed to go into this hotel together, and he told me to wait for him. He went up to go do a drug deal, and the guy that he did the deal with stabbed him 17 times. And I blamed myself for years for that. Many others also blamed me for that because I wasn't with him. However, it's one of the many times that I can see that divine intervention played a role in my life, because had I gone up there, that man was a murderer with a knife. We didn't have knives. We were little kids. He was a grown man. Me being up there, I believe if I would have went with him, I would also not be here. So divine intervention played a course in my life there, as it did multiple times on the streets. I have this little scar on my lip that's from a significant pummeling that I took while I was out on the streets. I have scars all over my body. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. I've been beaten brutally. Been, when you're a little kid on the streets. So there are definitely perpetrators out there on the streets looking for an opportunity to take advantage of a child. And so I've had many of those experiences, and it's just a life of drugs and alcohol where, many women, I can't even describe how many women. One thing that I found, of course, as a child, there were some older women. I remember I was 15, I had a 21-year-old girlfriend, because she had an apartment and it's a place that I could go stay. Didn't really like her much, other than she had an apartment and I needed a place to stay. Spent a lot of time eating out of garbage cans. We would steal money to go to Skipper's all-you-can-eat fish and chips. I don't know if you know what Skipper's is. Some people may, some may not, but they were a fish place where I grew up, and we could go get all-you-can-eat fish and chips. We'd steal money. Two of us would go in with a brown paper bag, and we'd get all-you-can-eat fish and chips. We'd get an order, eat it, get another order, put it in the bag, get an order, eat it, get another order, put it in the bag, and then we would go downtown and feed the rest of the kids. There was McDonald's would throw hamburgers away at the end of the day, and we would go get garbage bags of hamburgers. Chill's Donuts would throw the bags of donuts away at the end of the night. And so we would go out to the dumpster and get the bags of donuts so that we could eat donuts. We slept under bridges, slept in alleys with curbs as our pillows, doing shifts. And so, we try to protect each other, although failed miserably because we were kids. Many died. Many did not. Thank the Lord I survived. Yeah, it was a tragic life. I lived that way. And I mean, I can't put dates. I can remember friends, so many friends that had died, friends that went off to prison, just, all of the violence and the anger and the fighting, and even friends that betrayed each other. I remember being betrayed by some friends that were supposed to be friends, and they tried to rob me at a party one night. One of them coaxed me outside, and another one, I was supposed to have some money. So one of the things, me and my friend, I won't mention names, but I had a friend, and he and I figured out that because we were so violent, there's a lot of ladies already working the streets, right? A lot of prostitutes who took great care of us. They would feed us, they would buy us clothes. I have a heart for those women out there to this day because they were like moms to us. They took really good care of us. They would get their customers to get rooms for them to do their business. And then when they were done with their business, they would give us the keys so we could have a room and a shower. They would buy us food. Anyhow, we figured out that these ladies didn't want, the traditional pimp, but they still needed protection. And so we were willing to go hang out outside of hotels just to make sure that if somebody got this is during the time. If you look in Washington State, there's a story of the Green River Killer back in the 80s. And this is during that time. And so there was a lot of ladies coming up disappearing that, we'll say worked in the oldest profession in the world. And so they knew us. They knew our reputation for violence. And so they would ask us to come hang out outside the rooms in case something went wrong or somebody tried to hurt them. And so we would do that. And we were paid to do that. And so we weren't pimps by the traditional state of the word. However, we offered protection for a price. We would have done it for free. They just paid us. And so we had money. So to go back to this story, our friends knew that we had money. And so the one friend, he lured me outside. The other friend was in the bushes, and he came out of the bushes and put a knife to my throat, and they tried to take the money. Now, I had the money in my pocket, but I told them I did not have the money. My other buddy had the money in his pocket, so I would need to go get him. And they fell for it, and they let me go in the house to get the other friend. And so we went out the back door, hit the railroad tracks, and that began the splinter of the little street gang that we had down there. And so a lot of things fell apart then. And things, there's a lot of splintering going on and betrayal and things of that nature. So I, again, learned early on that you couldn't trust anybody. You had to always watch your back. You couldn't let anybody in, although you had to figure out how to let everybody in so that you could manipulate them to get the things that you needed to survive: money, food, clothes, those things. You still had to be cautious of who you let in, and you just couldn't trust anybody. And so that began my framework of relationships. My dad used to always tell me, you got to look for the quality, not the quantity. I never did figure that out. I figured I had to have quantity of everybody around me. I didn't care so much about the quality. I wanted what they had. And that for me was a big part of my life, is just taking people in, using people, building relationships to feed me, getting involved in relationships with women to suit my own needs and purposes. And as soon as I was done with them, throwing them away. I couldn't even count the number of relationships that I had. I couldn't begin to tell you. A very fragmented soul that really did not care about anybody. I went through life like a carnival, and everything was my personal ride. And so that went on. That went on into my 50s, but I kept watching my friends die or go to prison. I had been in and out of juvenile detention. When I turned 18, I went to jail within a week of being 18. Got in a lot of trouble. I wasn't doing anything different than my friends that went off to prison, and I knew it was about a matter of time. Anyhow, I was given an opportunity to go into the military, and so that was what I decided to do. I'd already gotten married. I'd moved away from the city that I grew up in. I had moved south to Portland, gotten married already, had a kid, but behind the scenes, I was still living the same old life and was getting in trouble. And so I was given an opportunity to go into the military. And so I took that opportunity, and that's what I did. I joined the Army. And so today, people see that and they go, Happy Veterans Day, you're a hero, you joined the Army, you served in combat, you did all of these things. So when I went into the Army, it wasn't because of God and country. It was because I was running from the things that were bound and determined to catch up from me. I wasn't going in there to, watch my buddies' six. I was going in there to watch my own six. And I'll tell you, going into the military, that wasn't any easier, I think, than going into prison. When you come in as a feral child and you have to go into this extreme environment of diligence and accountability and structure. Yeah, I didn't have any of that, not since before I was 10 years old. Going from living life however you wanted and doing whatever you wanted and never answering to anybody or doing what you're told, and going in and out of jails and institutions, and being able to party whenever you want, to being locked down with a bunch of guys and having to learn how to exercise, when to go to bed, when to get up, having a bed. So much that it was wow, what a experience that was. However, I excelled at that experience. I did very well when I went into basic training. I shot my weapon well. I threw grenades well. I did hand-to-hand combat well, although they did have to rein me in because I would lose my cool because I had so many anger issues. I excelled in the military. 2 years in a row, I won Superior Soldier. That's how well I did in the military. And I did that. I was in for about 8 years. Mind you, at that same time, I'm married. I have children. My two oldest were born during that time. But behind the scenes, I was still doing the same old stuff. I was still self-medicating. I still had a lot of trauma in my past. I still had a lot of hurt. Didn't have a good relationship with my mom. She would show up to see the grandbabies, but she wouldn't. She really was sick, and her and I just never really had a good relationship. And I started getting a relationship with my dad when my oldest son was born, because I started realizing like being a father wasn't all that. And I started seeing through a lot of my mom's lies, and I started working on a relationship with my dad, who I have a tremendous relationship with my dad now. I love my dad. He's my superhero. He's just an amazing man. I look at everything that he sacrificed to make sure that us kids were taken care of, even though I was off running and doing the things that I was doing. I mean, he still worked in the shipyards, in the belly of the ships, hunched over, welding, inhaling those fumes and asbestos and all of it, just to make sure that my mom had money to take care of us kids, despite the fact that she would just blow it on drugs and alcohol. He tried. He really did try. And anyhow, so I still kept doing the same stuff behind the scenes. Now, it was hard to be superior soldier, air quotes, and still be behind the scenes and partying and doing the things that I was doing, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all this stuff behind the scenes. And eventually it caught up with me. And in 1990, I believe it was, now I'd already been divorced because, that didn't work out. I had a ex-father-in-law who loved his daughter, and he saw through me. And to this day, the man can't stand me. And I don't blame him. He every bit should not like me, because I married my ex-wife because we showed up at a Bible study together. I went down to Oregon to see a friend and ended up staying with the friend and met her at his parents were pastors, and it ended up being a cult. But not all pastors run cults. That's not what I'm saying. This particular group ended up being a cult, and this is part of the story. They actually, the first time I showed up to this Bible study, because I was a street kid that was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do to get my life together, get right before I ended up in prison. And my ex-wife that attended this Bible study for the first time also, because a friend of hers invited her. And so because we attended it at the same time for the first time, then that was a sign from God that we were supposed to get married. So within 3 months, we were married. Yeah, sick. It should have never happened. Not that she was a bad person. She had a relationship with her dad that she was in another bad relationship, and he didn't want her being connected with some street kid. I was everything that he saw me for, and she should have listened to him, and she didn't. But for me, he didn't like me. He offered me, we had a really extravagant wedding. He offered for me to go away. He would give me whatever it was going to cost him for the wedding to go away. And for me, that was a challenge. And so for me, it was, no, I'm going to make this happen just because I'm going to show you. And it just shows the intentions in my heart at that time. And so I married her. It was 3 months from meeting her to the time that we got married. And he tried. I mean, there was times that we ended up living with him because I couldn't afford to make it and take care of a family. And there was fighting. I fought with her dad. I fought with her brother. I fought with a lot of people in her family who really saw through the person that I was, but it was a challenge for me to stick it out. And, to this day, I don't blame any of them for seeing through me. There was a lot of things that I wish had been done different, but that being said, I mean, what else would you do as a dad? What else should you do as a dad but try to protect your little girl? And which, again, we talked about this in the segment with Melissa, in dads, protect your daughters. Now, that's not saying that that's what I did. I'm saying from the perspective that I have now that, oh man, how I should have been there for my kids, how I should have done things different for my kids. But we're only as sick as our secrets, and you can't see the forest through the trees, right? We just do what we do as broken individuals, not to justify any of it, but that's the way that things happen. And so I was divorced in 95, I believe, is when my divorce happened. But I do know that I had a couple of children in that relationship, and my mom would come and visit, and my dad would come and visit. My relationship with my dad got stronger. My relationship with my mom got more fractured. She became really good friends with my ex-wife, the point that me and my ex-wife separated. I was living back up north in Washington, where I'm from, and in the same apartment complex as my mom. Now, my mom was a Wiccan high priestess and practiced black magic and all kinds of things, and very broken person at the bars all the time, always inebriated. She had a lot of injuries, so she was always on a painkiller. She had a painkiller addiction. And there was just a lot of turmoil. And I was living in the same apartment complex as my mom, and my ex-wife actually moved up before we were divorced, but we were separated. She wanted to come up and try to reunite, but I was back doing the old things. And my mom and her ended up being really close. And they would go party all the time together. That really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I got really nasty, and my relationship with my mom got even worse. All I wanted was that relationship to get better. So in 1995, I was just tired of being broken. I was in another relationship. This girl, she was my fiance, a gal that I actually had known earlier in life, and she ended up pregnant by me. And I wanted to try to straighten things out. I already had two children that were broken because of me. I wanted to try to fix things here because she was pregnant. We were going to have a child, which would be my third and her second. I wanted to get clean. And I also wanted to fix the relationship with my mom. And so I decided to go to treatment. And um, I went to tell my mom that I was going to treatment. And I remember this is the last, well, I went and I told my mom, I said, Mom, she's pregnant. We're going to have a baby. I want to change my life. I love this woman, and I want to make sure that I'm going to do the right thing. I've never done that before. I want to do this. Vague memories of the way the conversation went. I remember going into treatment. I remember being in a blackout period, and I remember just living with that regret of this interaction that I had with my mom, and I wanted to make amends, and so maybe it was that week. I think it was a week that I couldn't have any visitors, but then on Friday, they were going to let us have visitors on the weekend or something like that. And I remember calling my mom and telling her I would like her to come to visiting day over the weekend because I would like to, you know, I didn't tell her that I wanted to make amends, but that was my purpose, was to bring her in and make amends. And my hope was that my mom would get clean too. However, I invited her. I was allowed to have one visitor. And instead of my fiance, instead of my dad, instead of anybody else, I reached out to my mom to have her come visit. And she said she would be there. And so visiting day came around, and it was the day before she said she was coming. I woke up the next day. It was visiting day. We're in our first group of the day. And I was so excited. I was so pumped. My mom's going to come. We're going to get clean together. This is what's going on in my head. Well, things are going to be great. She's going to get away from that Wiccan religion that she's involved in and all of that witchcraft. She's going to get clean, and we're going to be able to have a good relationship. And, I'm sitting in this group. I'm excited. And one of the RAs walks into the group room, and he didn't say anything. The individual that was teaching the class that morning, he was a chemical dependency counselor who was running that class that morning, turned to the RA and said, "Can I help you?" And me, I was, always a clown. And I spoke up and I said, "He's here for me." And the RA looked over and he says, "Well, actually, Mr. Hoskins, I am here for you." And I said, and I thought I was in trouble. I'm like, no, I'm just kidding, man. I was just kidding. I thought I was going to lose my visitation because I was being a clown in group. He had this look on his face, and I couldn't determine the look on his face. He's like, "No, really, I need you to come with me." I'm like, "No, man, please don't take my visitation. I was just kidding. My mom's coming today. I don't want to lose my visitation. Please, this is important. I'll be quiet for the rest of the group." He's like, "Mr. Hoskins, I really need you to come with me right now." And I got up with my head down, knowing that I was in trouble and was going to lose my visitation. And I went with him into the director's office. And when I walked in the door, my dad's wife, my fiance, were all sitting there crying. This is only the second time I've ever seen my dad cry. And I'm like, "What's going on?" And so I've got a little brother that lived a life much like I lived. He desired to be like me. And the first thing that I thought of is, "Oh no, something's happening to him." And I'm like, "What's going on? What's wrong with him?" And they said, "It's not him. It's your mom." I'm like, "What do you mean? Your mom's dead. She's not here anymore." And I just like, "No, this is sick. This is not a joke. This isn't something you should be." "She's coming to visit me today." "No, she's gone. She's gone, Michael." My dad's cried. "She's gone." And I lost it. I couldn't believe it. Of course, I didn't stay in treatment. They let me go for supposedly 3 days to make arrangements and do all of those things. I think I actually did go back, but I left. There was no way that I was going to make it after that. That was my life just turned upside down at that point. And I had to deal with that for years and years and years. And I just could not get my head around that. And I self-medicated through that, drugs, alcohol, you name it. I did it. Even though I was still in the military, I was still drinking and drugging, getting people to, they do mandatory UAs, but I'd get guys to go to in a cup for me, and so I could pass. But it all caught up with me, and I believe it was 1998 when I was diagnosed with hepatitis C and liver cancer. The hepatitis C had gone on for so long that my liver had deteriorated, and they didn't expect me to live very long. And so during that time, I did quit using the drugs and alcohol during that time. I ended up going into a test to study for some interferon treatment. Boy, nasty stuff, interferon treatment. It was alpha interferon 2B, and it was not the pegylated stuff that they use now. This stuff it was chemo on steroids. Hair was falling out. I lost a lot of weight, got very sick. Everybody thought I was going to die. I was supposed to. They gave me a very limited time. They didn't figure it was going to be a positive outcome. And so that went on for about a year, the treatments and chemo. And I went to my best friend. He had been going to a church and gotten saved during this time. And he's one of those kids, like he was a street kid too, but he had enough common sense to not get caught up in a lot of the stuff. And he would stay with my mom a lot. He was just very cautious about getting involved in a lot of stuff that I got involved with. He had a much leveler head. Not that he didn't do things that we were doing. He just, I don't know, something, you could really see the hand of protection over him to keep him away. I think it was because if he went all in, he was a goner, and God had a place for him in the future. It so really protected him. People would think he wasn't extreme. However, if he went in, he would go all in. He's that kind of there's no gray area. It was all black or white. And so he just, some reason, he was just protected back down, and knowing him now, I see why. However, I wasn't that smart. And so I got caught up in everything. But that being said, Mark, he had been inviting me for a long time, and I just wanted him to shut up. I wanted to die in peace, and I wanted him to feel like at least he tried. And so in 1999, he invited me to church, and I decided to go to his little church. And they decided to pray for me. And I was so mad at him. I tried to stay, in the back, out of the limelight. It's just like, I just want my friend to shut up and be happy that I showed up once. And so I showed up, and they prayed for me. Now, mind you, I was in another relationship at this time. So she was there too. Now, with back up a little bit, relationship with the girl that I knew when I was young and had a daughter with, that fell apart because I lost it after my mom's suicide. I couldn't hold it together, and I just went crazy, and she had no choice but to get out. And so she did. And I wasn't there for her, and I wasn't there for my daughter. I wasn't there for my other two kids. I was a horrible dad. I was a horrible human being. I was broken, and I was just wallowing in my self-pity and trying to mask all of the pain that I had experienced up to this point in life. From there, back forward, I'm in another relationship. And this gal that I was in a relationship with, I should not have been in a relationship with. Everybody warned me about her. Everybody warned me not to get involved, but being a hard-headed, stubborn individual, I still had to be there. So anyhow, back in the church service, they're praying for me, and they pray for healing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll just get this over with. I'm going to go die. Well, part of this program that I was in, the medical program, the study program for the medications, part of what they did is they always took labs. They had to take labs because you're on this trial medication. They had to take, enzymes, all of this stuff, whatever all of that is. And so after getting prayed for, I went in that week and I got my test done again. And then within about a week or two, they called me and they're like, we need you to come in and do labs again. I thought, oh, great. Here we go. Something's not working right. Something's not looking right. Maybe I'm going to die a little sooner. And so I went in and I saw my nurse and I said, what's going on? Is everything okay? She said, we just need to do some labs. Again, we think something, didn't go right or whatever. I can't remember exactly what she said. So they took labs again. And within a week, they were calling me back. We need you to come back in. We're going to do a liver biopsy. And I'm like, after the first liver biopsy, I'd swore I was never going to do another one because it was so extremely painful. They actually make you, there's no numbing or anything like that. You have to hold your breath so that they can stick this long needle between your ribs into your liver to take a tissue sample. And it's not a fun process. It was extremely painful. I have a high pain threshold, and it actually brought tears to my eyes. So I swore I'd never do another one, but they said they wanted to do another one, and it was imperative that we did another one because the lab results are coming back. They just can't understand why the lab results were coming back the way they were. And so, despite my trepidation of another liver biopsy, I agreed to do another one if they agreed to numb me this time, which they did. It wasn't as bad as the first one, but still significantly painful. And so, waiting some time, I can't remember how long, the biopsy results came back. And my hepatitis C and liver cancer was non-detectable. Get to the base of the story. So I went to this church service and was for go in, get labs couple of times in a liver biopsy, and now I go from being on the verge of death to now it's non-detectable. They cannot find any trace, and as a matter of fact, my liver looks healthier than most young people's liver. And just keep in mind of all of the drugs and alcohol I had put through my system at this time, it should not even look that healthy. So I got what I believe was a miraculous healing. Now, some people would say that it was the medication. However, I had been on this medication for better part of a year, and there were no results. Matter of fact, things just continually got worse. I was getting sicker. I was getting thinner. My hair was falling out. I was dying. And so, I don't think it was any small coincidence that when I walked into that church service and those people prayed for me and I ended up healed. And that was in 98. And here we are in 2026, almost 30 years later, and I'm still alive. I believe I got a miracle. And many people that you would talk to in my life would believe that I got a miracle. So I decided to get saved, needless to say. And now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that I walked a perfect life, because as you'll hear continuing on, it was not the case. I lived like a lot of people after they get saved. I lived like hell for 6 days out of the week, and then I went to church on Sunday, right? So not much changed in my life after that. Other than I did start going to church regularly. I did end up marrying the gal that everybody thought I should not be in, and that did not turn out well. That was a very toxic, tumultuous relationship. I didn't really want a marriage, nor did she. She needed somebody to help her survive so she could work, and somebody to help pay bills, and I needed a place to live, so I needed to pay bills. And we were just kind of, we'll just say, friends with benefits at that time. But it was a very toxic relationship. She was violent. I was violent. It was not a good relationship. We ended up separated after several years. We did step out and start a significant ministry at one point. I'm Blackfeet Indian. We had a Native American ministry that was really amazing until everybody started fighting about whether or not Jesus should be at the center of the ministry versus if that was offensive to natives or not. And I was on the side of, if he's not in it, it's not worth doing. And we had others that were in the bark of he's offensive to natives. We can't have him in the middle of it. And rather than stick to my guns, I decided, and I had gotten out of the military because of my illness in 98. And this is in 2008, I decided I can't sit here and fight for what's right. So rather than, stick in there and fight for what's right, I'm going to abandon everything. And so I left my wife. I had a child, a stepchild at that time, and a son with her. So for my fourth child. And I took it upon myself to re-enter the military. I was healthy again. I talked to a recruiter buddy of mine. And again, I used the Army to escape from all of my problems at home. And I ended up in the Middle East in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Told my buddy, I don't care who it's with. I just want to be on the next group going into the Middle East. This is post 9/11. Lots is going on. They need a lot of people. And so I was willing to go that route and sacrifice everything to go that. My hope was to go there and just die. I could die a hero rather than be here and be a coward and not fight for what's right. Some of this is uncomfortable to talk about. I've not talked about much in the past. So that's why I get uncomfortable talking about the military, because again, it wasn't about God and country for me. It wasn't about being there for my buddies. It was about honorable way to escape my life. And there was nothing honorable about it. So in 2008, I went back into the military and immediately into combat environment. By 2009, I was medevaced out of Iraq with injuries sustained there and brought back here to the United States. I had to go through Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany during my medevac, and they were going to do surgery on me there. It was a spinal injury. They were going to do surgery there, and there was going to be like a year recovery process. And I asked them to please let me go home. So there's two significant injury units here in the United States where they can send you, like Walter Reed in the East Coast, and then Madigan Army Medical Center on the West Coast. And that was close to home. And so I requested that before they did surgery, if there was going to be a year recovery, I could go there and be close to family, at least while I was going through this recovery process. And so that's where they let me go. They let me go to Madigan Army Medical Center, where I recovered from my injuries, had surgery, all of that. And I was there for some time. It was 2009 when I got injured in medevac. I was at the between Madigan and the Warrior Transition Battalion at Madigan. I was there until November of 2011. So a little over a year and a half that I spent recovering from the injuries. And still haven't completely recovered. I've had multiple surgeries since leaving the military because of those injuries and whatnot. But so I'm back home recovering from my injuries. I'm still married. I still have children, but I'm still in a relationship that is not an okay relationship. And it was very toxic. And I can't really go into a lot of detail and talk about that. Anytime I get involved in any of that kind of stuff, it brings a lot of drama and a lot of chaos in my life, and it affects children. And so I'm just not willing to talk about that, but I will tell you that that marriage ended disastrously. And of course, I didn't help this case any. So when I got back from Iraq, one of the medics that was part of the medevac process was a young lady that medevaced me. Now, as a medic, when you medevac an individual, you don't get to just follow them in their care. You don't know what's happened to them. So when you send somebody off, you're most likely never going to hear again what their actual condition is. When my unit decided to return home from Iraq, I wanted to be part of the ramp ceremony when they came in. And so I showed up, and I was on a walker at that time because of my injuries. But the young medic, who was married and had kids of her own, saw me at the ramp for the ramp ceremony. And after the ramp ceremony, ran up and gave me a big hug. And that right there. Now, I was in my 40s at the time, and she was in her early 20s. And she wasn't the most attractive girl in the world, but she wasn't unattractive either. She was just your plain Jane. And of course, she's in an army uniform, so she's not wearing anything that's super form-fitting or anything. She runs up and gives me a hug. There's nothing more to it than she was the medic that medevaced me. And she saw me for the first time since medevacing. And giving me a hug, my ex-wife automatically accused me of having an affair while I was in Iraq with this young lady, which did not happen. That was not the case. But I'm one of those guys, or at least I was back then, that if you're going to accuse me of something, that's what I'm going to do. And our relationship fell apart after that. And I decided to go out and get me a young girlfriend, which did not help the drama in my life at all. But just say I ended up with a very bitter, angry woman that sought all means to destroy me. I mean, I don't blame her looking back on it now. And I should have never gone out and got a 25-year-old girlfriend when I was in my 40s that was just sick and demented. And of course, I went back into the old, drinking, drugging, partying, everything I can to irritate everybody I can. Just thinking about myself and not being there for my kids, being there for my wife, not being there for my family. Everything that I tell you, husband should be, a father should be. There's a reason that I talk about those things. You see, the reason I talk about those things is because I know how to do it wrong. Don't do what I did, and your kids won't suffer the consequences of your sins. Like, I was a horrible father, and my kids hurt for that. I was a horrible husband, and several women hurt for that. I was a self-centered, it's an egotistical, maniacal, narcissistic piece of garbage. They didn't deserve that. Do I think I deserve some of the things that happened to me? Probably, but some of them I don't think anybody deserves. That being said, that relationship didn't go well, and it was a fight to get out of. And in that time, we'll forward to 2013, where I met my beautiful wife, Melissa. Now, I'm not going to go into our story because if you heard during the conversation with her, our story has tragic events of its own that we've had to overcome and come through. And we are looking forward to sharing that testimony with some of you married people that may be struggling. But I didn't change much in the beginning of that relationship. However, God is good. And so the hope is, after coming through all of that, we did attend a church for a while when I returned back to church, and she got saved. And then we walked away. And then we got involved in all of the same stuff. We're, again, kindred spirits. She is me and I am her. When we first met, we laughed for the better part of a month, so hard that we joked that we had six-pack abs because of the laughter. But we are identical, which they say oil and water don't mix, right? But most people, that's how their relationships are. Oil and water eats two different individuals. Although we're not the same, we do have different perspectives. Our stories are very similar. But in 2019, we met some dear friends, Mary. God used them to call us back. They lived the way they were supposed to live. We just knew if that's what believers were, we were supposed to be that. And so that's what we did. We went back to church. And then through the COVID epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to look at it as, Melissa lost her job at the church she was working at then. And I got mad, but I swore that if God would take me back, I would never leave him again. And so even though we left the church because of the way that they let her go, we did not leave him. We started looking at things. We started reading the Bible for ourselves. And our eyes started being open to some things that we knew we were doing wrong. And so we started walking those out. And I have not left God since that time. And because of that, the healing has been better. I'm able to talk about these things. I'm able to forgive those in my past that have done things to me. I don't carry that bitterness anymore. I'm able to see that when somebody acted a certain way to me, I blamed them rather than looking at my part in it and what did I do to bring it on. Not that that justifies their behavior, but I can't justify my behavior either. My kids didn't want a relationship with me. They hated me. Now I have my kids in my life. I had grandbabies that I hadn't met for, I think it was the better part of 8 or 9 years. And during all of my sickness and ridiculousness. And my kids started reaching out to me when I started walking right and getting out of those things. You know, Melissa talked about motorcycle clubs. I was riding with motorcycle clubs, you know, and they weren't nice motorcycle clubs. Now that I'm not doing those things, now that I've not made those things priorities and I'm walking the way I'm supposed to be walking, trying to be the dad I'm supposed to be, I can't make up for the things that I did and the times I weren't there. But now I can be there. Now I can watch my grandkids grow. I didn't even meet my grandson for the first 8 years of his life. My first granddaughter for the first, I think 4 years of her life. And then my son reached out to me when I decided to start doing the right things. What a coincidence, right? He decides to reach out to me and say he wants me to meet my grandkids and wants to work on our relationship. And it couldn't have been a better time because not long after that, he started going through some things, and I've been so blessed to be a part of his life and to be able to mentor him through some things. And not that I'm the perfect dad or the perfect grandpa. Gosh, I don't see them near enough. I want to see them so much more, but I try, I try every day, and I fail miserably, but I try every day to at least reach out to them and let them know that I love them. They're important to me, and I get to watch my grandbabies and send them birthday presents now and talk to them on the phone, see videos and pictures, and I didn't have that before. And so there's restoration when we start walking the way we're supposed to start walking. When we find our purpose, when we start walking in our purpose and functioning in our purpose and doing the right thing, it's amazing the way that things come around and work themselves out, and that God can be in the midst of that and heal us if we just put our focus on him. I look back at all of the tragic events in my life and all the things, sometimes I would think, how come my friends are dead and I'm still alive? They were so much better than me. But I look back now and I think, man, there was really a purpose on my life. And now that I'm here, I work for our congregation here as a maintenance worker. That's such a fun job. It's a perfect job for me because I get to do something different every day. Yeah. So that's been amazing. I have found that life is not all about me. I really enjoy serving other people, not serving myself. I enjoy being there for other people and helping other people. And it's so freeing to not have to worry about myself. God has provided income. And on top of that, I get to work for my congregation. It's not a lot of money, and I don't care because I don't do it for the money. And I get to meet a lot of other servants. And that's what I look for. And a lot of the people that you will hear on this podcast, they're going to be individuals that have come through tremendous pain and suffering, and spent a good portion of their life serving themselves and hurting others. But when they found out what their actual true purpose is, because you see, that's what the enemy does, is the enemy actually takes your purpose and he twists it. He'll take what you're supposed to be doing for others and he'll turn that into this amalgamation. So, a servant's heart will serve themselves and go through the pain and agony and struggles and trials until they figure out that that's not what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to allow God to take care of them. They're supposed to trust God and have faith and serve others. And when they're serving others, that's where true passion comes in. There's nothing more fulfilling for me than helping others. I love that about individuals when they can sacrifice themselves for the benefit of others. And so that is where I would challenge you in finding your purpose. And you'll hear that a lot on this podcast about functioning in your purpose, finding your purpose, because when you're functioning in your purpose, there's true peace, there's true harmony, there's nothing else more freeing, right? You focus on God, he fills the hole in your heart. You trust him. He's your buddy. He's got your six. You don't worry about anything. He said he's going to take care of you. He said if he loves the birds of the air and they don't want for nothing, how much more he loves you and you won't want for anything. And so you just trust him that he's going to give you whatever you need. Not always what you want, but he's going to give you what you need. You don't have to worry about anything. So then you can function in your purpose and take care of other things. And whether that's you're a preacher, a teacher, an encourager, a server, any of those different talents, gifts, when you're functioning in that, there's nothing more freeing. And so I would just like to encourage you to figure out what that means for you and that you could be free. Now, I've probably missed a lot of things in my story. I can sit here right now, as a matter of fact, and think of a lot of other tragic things that I've kind of gone over, but I'm not going to go back and go over those things. A lot of people that are going to come in here and be interviewed, they're going to have that same experience. They're going to, after the podcast, go, oh man, I forgot to touch on that. Oh, this was significant. I forgot to touch on that. And so there are some other significant things that I could talk about, but at the risk of going too terribly long, I will go ahead and end the podcast here. I just want to thank you for being a part of this. And, if you've gotten something from this, if this has encouraged you, or if you know somebody that could be encouraged by this message, I would challenge you to, one, like, share, and subscribe. Well, likes don't take but a quick second to pop that little thumbs up. The subscription is the same thing. It doesn't take much to hit that little button, even set the little bell so you get notifications when new videos come up on YouTube. Also, sharing, now that costs a little bit of time. You gotta copy the link and get it into your messages and then find that person's contact information so you could say, hey, I think you would get something out of this, and share it with them. Maybe you don't know anybody that can get anything out of this. My hope is that there's somebody out there that gets something out of this, because I love you. I really want the best for you. I really want you to come through those things you're struggling with. I want you to know that you don't have those challenges in your life because God has it out for you. You have challenges in your life because God trusts you with that challenge, because he knows you're going to overcome it, so that when the person that needs a mentor in getting through that same challenge comes along, you're going to be ready to walk them through it. You could be the only Jesus somebody meets. And so he trusts you with that opportunity. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast here. Again, I love you, and we'll see you next time. God bless.